Hello everyone, and welcome to Fast Company Talks, the event that we've been working on for some time now. Ever since COVID-19 has hit us, we've been working very hard to make sure that we still, stay engaged with you and really continue the conversation about innovation with everyone. So today we're starting a very important discussion, which I think is on everyone's mind, about the education, or at least schools and technology, if you want. Everyone is concerned about the fact that young people, there is this uncertainty about whether they are going to school or not, and if they do go to school, how will be their situation when they do. So today we're looking forward to discuss this issue together with some leaders in society right now in the space of education. So later on, we will be joined by Mr. Mavovana, who is the principal at Hector Peterson Secondary School. And also we are joined by a CEO from Brainline, an online school. Coleen is here to really share the e-learning story with us. And also Professor Mmaki Jantjies, who is an academic and a technologist who has been focusing solely on the issue of e-learning, skills development, and many other technology solutions that can really make an advancement in society. So we're really looking forward to enjoy this and also really not just talk about it, but really drive a point home in as far as saying, what is it that can be done to make sure that young people can still have access to education? Maybe for now, let us chat to Dr. Mmaki Jantjies, and maybe she can. She's also in a better position to paint a picture about the state of education schools in the age of COVID-19.
Thank you so much, Wesley, and thank you to Fast Company for hosting such an important conversation. Thank you to the great panelists also that will be sharing thoughts on how we can move forward as a country. I think first things first, let's acknowledge the fact that the e-learning conversation has been going on for many years. And let's also acknowledge the fact that there's many disparities within South Africa and within our schools, particularly looking at the public education within South Africa. There's been a lot of innovation happening within private education, and therefore you could see how e-learning has probably advanced within our private education in the country. But when we look at our public schools, I think COVID-19 presents so many challenges, but it also presents opportunities on how we rethink and we relook education, on how technology provides us as an enabler platforms that we can actually support teaching and learning in the comfort of our own homes. But I think before we consider it as a national approach that we should put a much more concerted effort in it, we need to deal with the barriers that make it difficult to see it being realized during COVID-19.
No, that's very true. And I think a lot of parents, even though they've known about it, they've known that to some extent there's this option. But, it's one thing to know about something when you have options. But now, all of a sudden, those options are not as much. Maybe Coleen can come in here and maybe, before she can delve deeper into the e-learning discussion, maybe share with us what she has seen so far, especially during this period, in terms of the adoption of e-learning, at least from the point of view of Brainline, but also broadly in this space.
It's been very interesting times the past, say, 2-3 months for not only e-learning, but I think education as a whole, not only in South Africa, but right across the globe. And I've been thinking to myself all this time, there is an idiom in Afrikaans that says, like frogs in hot water, and suddenly when the pot starts to boil, suddenly we realize that something is amiss because we didn't realize that the temperature is actually rising around us. And the conversations, as the professor quite rightly said, this is not a new conversation. This conversation started many years ago. And Leslie, I spoke to you a little while ago about show and tell. Now, Professor Jantjies, you are very young, but I'm sure you'll know what this is. Let's see if the camera will enable me to do the show and tell bit. If you remember this bit. Now, this date on this one says 1987. Actually, this one says 1922. Now, for the younger audience, this will sound like a complete age ago, and we were able to pack the complete curriculum in a box like this. This was our complete curriculum. And this is when this conversation actually started, right back in 1987. And if I can even go further with the show and tell, this was, the date on this one says in the 1995. Now, this is a stiffy disk. Nobody even could probably remember what this was, but this was the e-learning conversation back when. Now, the concept of blended learning, Professor Johannes Cronje has got a very interesting theory that he says blended learning is not actually only combining e-learning with the face-to-face classroom or combining technology with a face-to-face classroom. Yeah. Now the conversation in blended learning is starting to turn, where it says, is it not the different learning styles? Is it not behaviorism versus constructivism, and combining that within the e-learning conversation, and not only looking at technology, combining that into the classroom? Now, further to my frogs in hot water, I've showed you all of the other issues. Do you even remember? I think you would remember this little thingy. Now we use it to ward off the birds in our fruit trees because it sparkles and it keeps the birds out of our fruit trees. But each and every one of these technologies that I've just shown you was to us as a company a movement from one delivery system to the next, to the next, to the next. And COVID-19, the past 3 months, keeps reminding me of exactly that. Because after this actually became the internet and uploads and downloads. We don't no longer need this device or this entity to deliver something in a digital format to somebody else out there. So all of these, I don't even know how many computers that you buy these days actually can take a CD or a compact disc or a DVD for that matter. We don't even think about that anymore. And in the same way, COVID-19 is just another step that we need to take. And I'm actually delighted that a crisis has brought on this new awareness of how do we use technology in education. So we've spoken, yes, Wesley?
No, that is true. I agree with you. The crisis is forcing us to consider this. Definitely. No, carry on.
Right. That's absolutely right. So I'm actually delighted that teachers and schools were forced to think about things in a different way, because otherwise we would have just been the frogs in the hot water until everybody started to boil and death were imparted into our normal environment, and that would have not been a good thing. If I can maybe draw an analogy, you know what, when we talk about, for me, data in the digital world is almost like water to our communities these days. If we don't have data in e-learning, it's almost like trying to do school, but not being able to, in the COVID-19 environment, wash your hands and exercise proper hygiene. So data for e-learning to me is water, like water is to COVID-19 and hygiene. If that is the thing that I can say, that is to me the closest analogy that I could think of. So now that we are thinking e-learning, now that we are thinking different ways, I think we need to think about data as well. We are very aware of the fact that data across the globe in many countries is actually free. But how long have we not been advocating for good and proper global price-related data prices so that we can access. And now we're not even talking about these little things that we need to access the internet,
Exactly.
or a laptop that we're talking to each other on at the moment, or a smartphone or a tablet for that matter. We haven't even gone there. But the water to e-learning is data. So we need to start there and think about, okay, if we can get data prices down, now we can talk about how do we access that. So the conversation is a rather large one. And it's not only e-learning, it's about all of these fundamentals that go with that. But the fortunate thing about COVID-19, now the crisis is upon us. Now we have to attend to it. Where previously we could have just had these educational conversations and boardroom issues and how do we, and then we walk away all with a fuzzy feeling on our heart because now we've had the conversation, but we haven't actioned anything after that conversation. COVID-19 forces us to action the conversation and not only talk the talk.
That is so true. Thank you, Coleen, for those points. And Dr. Jantjies, I think from what you've seen, there's some really interesting insight. I think the conversations I've had before, especially around the fact that some in society have access and some don't. I mean, Coleen speaks about data. What are you seeing on the ground? What is really happening? I mean, some people talk about the fact that there's access to mobile phones for it. Does that naturally translate to access? What is really happening?
Thank you so much, Wesley. I think let me provide a bit of a context on some of the work that I do. So for many years, we've been researching on how can mobile learning assist within electronic learning within public schools. And over the years, that evolved to teaching basic digital literacy to underprivileged schools, and then evolving to then working with teachers in public schools to see how, with the technology that they have, as basic as it is, they can start to bring in electronic learning within their context. And it's fascinating that Coleen showed a CD there. You'll be interested to know that many schools still use that as a storage device. And there hasn't been a lot of cloud migration for many public schools. There's one teacher that I work with closely, and he was telling me how he was advising the school. He's a young teacher, and he was advising the school to say that we really should be putting all this information on the cloud. And he was joking to say the conversation with the colleagues were that, this is safe. At least, if I want to take this home, I can just pull the CD out and continue to work at home. But I think that just highlights the challenges that we face within the sector, the education sector, to enable a good e-learning ecosystem. First things first, Wesley, you are so right. Issues related to data. Research ICT Africa has got good information that show that South Africa has one of the highest data prices. And so right there, it becomes a first barrier to enable people to access information online if you are offering them content on an online perspective. The second thing, if we look at the Statistics SA household surveys over the years, you can see that we are what I call mobile first country, meaning that many children's interaction with any digital platform will most likely first be on the mobile phone, and then later when they get access to things such as desktop, tablets in other contexts, then they can access information through that. So I think, and that is why you can see that in South Africa, a lot of research surrounding electronic and mobile learning has largely been focused on mobile platforms. For that very reason, that the household surveys reflect that many South Africans mainly just have access to mobile devices. And I think
Good. All right, those are very good points, Dr. Mmaki. Do you want to continue?
yes, it's a pity Mr. Mavovana is not here, but I just want to highlight that in the midst of COVID-19, what has been great has been to see the innovation of teachers in under-resourced schools. A simple example, we've witnessed teachers actually using WhatsApp to take pictures of notes and actually send them out to parents. There's one teacher who I really commend, who would stick a paper up on the wall and record themselves explaining a concept, and that mini video is then sent out to children, and equally with a worksheet that surrounds that. Whoever thought that WhatsApp would be a go-to learning portal for many, many schools? And you'll be surprised to know that it's not even, this problem is not unique to South Africa. Many advanced countries still have those many disparities within their public sector education, still with issues of access to devices, issues of connectivity that they face. And yet within those challenges, I think we need to sometimes commend our teachers that they can innovate within that. So I think the positives that come out of COVID-19 is seeing how the teachers themselves have adapted with the very little that they have to continue learning. I don't think prior COVID-19, there were classes that taught teachers how to use WhatsApp to transmit information and support learning. But seeing that organic innovation that has been coming out of schools and coming in constrained environments has been great. There are other platforms that teachers have moved to. We've also seen teachers moving to platforms such as Google Classroom and introducing that to many of their learners, for those who can actually access that learning content. But teachers going out of their way to teaching themselves how to navigate around that platform, how to avail content and continue learning has been great to also witness. But I also commend, I think, the initiatives from the government to not ignore radio and television. The Minister of Basic Education the other day was mentioning that in their own research, they found that only between 20 and 30% of children were actually accessing learning information seamlessly during this time. And so it shows you that we still battle with issues of access, and therefore we cannot ignore radio, we cannot ignore television as critical supplementary learning platforms that can continue stimulating learning even during a crisis. But it's great to see that the crisis has brought opportunities that brings to the fore the conversation that we need to have about taking e-learning seriously. There's a lot of innovation with people like Coleen, with startup companies innovating educational learning platforms, and academics who for years have been working around these areas, both on pedagogy, on the evolving perspective of teaching in an e-learning context requires a renewed sense of pedagogy, and how does that actually look like? So it's great to be coming to the fore and saying, we know the challenges, how are we going to move forward with the solutions?
Interesting. Those are words spoken truly. I think coming from you, you've seen, I think, in universities and also in schools, how parents, or at least teachers deal with the situation. So thank you for that. But then I'm wondering, what I've observed so far is that parents, this period has been a challenge for them. And I'm interested to know, because they are a very important, part of learning. You can talk teachers, yes, but what about parents? What has been your experience, within Brainline of getting parents to also engage in the process of getting young people to learn online? Are they battling, or what kind of support have you kind of provided for them to be able to assist young ones?
Oh yes, absolutely, Wesley. I've seen people really battle with this new challenge, and I always use the analogy of, if you like your little steak and chops on a Sunday afternoon on the braai, and you suddenly decide now you're going to be a vegetarian. Ooh, giving up those steaks and chops can be a difficult thing.
Very true.
So I would almost say it's almost like that. Now, having been, and now let's use a word that's been thrown about, and sometimes if you would use that word, People are really scared by it because it's got all sorts of connotation. But again, COVID-19 has placed this word into completely new perspective. Let's use the word home education or homeschooling. Now, prior to COVID-19, everybody said, oh, homeschooling, oh my goodness, nobody can homeschool. What's that all about? And suddenly COVID-19 comes and everybody who has done homeschooling became super moms and super dads. And all of us wear our Superman logos because now we homeschool. Woo, woo, we are the heroes of the day. So again, I'm delighted to that move that parents and everybody else out there can realize that in South Africa, the South African Schools Act says home education is legal and it is a valid option, alternative. It has completely changed the way that people view it, but also it's not an easy thing to do because now I, as a parent, become teacher, principal, counselor, janitor, everything that a school has provided for me, I have now got to stand in and do all of those things. And that's not an easy thing to do. Suddenly people are daunted by, I've got to do maths and biology and life science, because it's no longer biology, life science and all of these things. And it's just too much to handle. But how do you eat an elephant? You eat it spoonful by spoonful, little block by little block. So the key about this is knowledge is power. Information provides you with, okay, this is how it needs to get done. What are my resources out there? And what can I use to enable me to homeschool in my own home? But, and that's where I'm so delighted, where schools have taken the hands of parents out there because they know parents are so daunted by this new task. How can we help our parents? Because that we know that in this time, homeschooling for them might be short-lived, but we've got to empower them. We've got to strengthen their hands so that those kids can go back into school and do so smoothly and seamlessly. And that is where the challenge lies. But if we as parents sit down and decide, listen, this is something terrible. And that's why I'm so delighted with South Africa and South Africans, we as a nation. Throw a challenge at us. First of all, we make a lot of jokes to help us to get this thing around and get our heads around it. And we laugh at it and then we decide, okay, now let's get a grip and move on. This is the way that we're going to move forward. And how do we empower each other? That's where South Africans, to me, it's the best country in the whole world because throw challenges at everybody else and they crumble. But we don't. We stand fast and firm.
Exactly. No, that is so true. And one of those people that I'm seeing in action doing exactly that is Mr. Mavovana, who's joining us now, who serves as a principal at Hector Peterson Secondary School. I'll tell you a story one day in Kraaifontein in the Western Cape, where there was a big challenge at school, and this principal, came in there, brought in community leaders, and solved the problem. But that was a few years ago. But today is facing a challenge where COVID-19.
Your line is not very good, Wesley.
All right. Can you hear me now?
It's much better now.
All right. Thank you. So, Mr. Mavovana, we are all ears. We'd like to hear from the ground. How has COVID-19 affected your school? How has teachers? How are you coping? What is the situation now?
When the outbreak started, I think all of us were actually ill-prepared for this. And our school is not different. And it was when this started, we were just finalizing our term 1 assessment. And we're hoping that by the end of the school week, we'll be able to issue our reports. And that never happened because everything had to happen in a rush. And when the minister announced the start closure of the schools, all of us were hoping that first week after April, we'll be able to come back to school and continue with all our systems, which means we never gave any extra work to any learners because we're hoping that immediately after April, we'll all come back. And then a few days after then, the president announced the 21 days lockdown, and that changed almost everything. Because now we're to scramble, look for our learners, do an audit of how many of them are on devices. And remember, even those on devices, they are relying on the Wi-Fi that the school is providing. So having a device is one thing, but having access to the information that's being sent is another. So that was a big concern that we were actually having as a school, because we couldn't communicate with many of our learners, and even those teachers that could communicate with our learners, but many of them could not access the information that we're sending to them. For instance, in my class, I've got a class of 63 students. I'm teaching life science. I've got my experience on Google Classroom, but out of 63, only 3 of them are on Google Classroom, 20 cannot because they are not on devices.
Wow.
But even those are on devices, some of the devices they're using are their parents' devices. That means for them to access that device, the parent must be there. If the parent is not there, the learner cannot access the device. Again, if the parent does not have the data, the learner cannot access the device. So that's a concern. Now, I had to look at a way of how do I then reach out to those students who don't have devices, and also those who do have but don't have the data. So I still have to find ways of making copies and ask them maybe to come, because we've got security at school. So put a box at the gate and let the students come and pick up the information. We tried to use WhatsApp voice note, but again, how effective is that? Because not all students can access that information. So it has been really a very big struggle. We quickly had to do an audit of our grade 12. That's the class that we're concerned about. We have got about 215 grade 12s. But we realized that out of 215, only 127 of them have got devices, even if some of the devices are their parents. And then 88 don't have devices and therefore cannot access any information. But what you have picked up in terms of, if I'm giving a lesson through WhatsApp voice note, many of the students could not respond. And when I wanted to find out why they're not responding, the answer was that we couldn't listen to the voice note because we didn't have the data. So that was the biggest challenge that we are having. The other thing is that not all teachers were at a level where they can embrace technology. That has been a biggest challenge. And some of them do not know how to even use WhatsApp as a platform for teaching learners. So those are the concerns and the challenges that we were having and we still have at the moment.
Yeah. Thank you very much for painting that picture. And I think what you just highlighted is probably true across South Africa in many schools. Obviously, there are some that are privileged, that have access, but obviously there are some, like you've described, that you know. But it's interesting to hear that at Hector Peterson Secondary School, you also use technology, even though many can actually access it. That is very interesting and encouraging, and therefore that means that the leadership like yours, if you have teachers that can lead in the way that you, and if they get the support, then things can start to. So that is interesting. So at this point, maybe we need to also start think about what are the solutions. What are the practical things that can be done to meet you halfway? Because if I hear you correctly, you say, for instance, you have about 88 and or it is 88 that do not have access is in metric. So
Yes.
Looking at
we have not done any audit for the other grades from grade 8 to 11, even though teachers, they have actually formed WhatsApp groups now so that they can be in contact with their learners. But again, the assessment I'm getting that not all learners in all the grades are able to access those lessons.
Yeah.
The other challenging thing is that the parents, many of our parents are illiterate. And therefore, they cannot give any support to their learners in terms of unpacking the work that the teachers are giving. And the parents will start complaining that there's a lot of work that's actually coming through, and they can't cope with that kind of information.
Yeah, interesting. So at this point, as I've indicated, I think we've spoken a lot about these challenges, and we've looked at the challenge of digital divide. Maybe let's focus at some of the solutions that are possible. I think you paint a very good picture of what the challenges are, and that should help us to get a sense of what are the practical things that can be done. Maybe, Prof. Jantjies, can you just share some of the things that you've seen working in other parts of the world that are similar to ours, and or at least in some areas in South Africa where you've seen, interventions. Maybe can you give us an examples and maybe highlight what you consider to be a practical solution that can be considered? This one challenge, if you will.
I'm so glad that Mr. Mavovana managed to join us, because I think he represents what we've experienced, that if you have a good management team that is willing to innovate and that is willing to think out of the box, you end up having a school that has a good uptake amidst all the many challenges that they have. So I really commend Mr. Mavovana for the leadership that he's brought to his school in that sense. But I think I'll start with teacher training. I think in a South African context, one of the things we largely advocate for is to ensure that all teachers are equally given skills that are necessary to maintain this technology that we bring inside the classroom and beyond the classroom. Because you have a situation of what we term as digital natives and digital immigrants. And what you tend to see is, for example, in some schools, if we come in and we work with learners, but we don't work with teachers, you end up having somewhat of a resentment of this tool and technologies that you bring. Teachers also sometimes see technology more as something that is additional to their work and not integrated within their work, as a functional tool that supports your everyday work. And if we could have a concerted effort where we have training programs to actually support teachers in schools on an ongoing basis and not a once-off. The other thing, there are many things, other solutions, but I'll just draw attention to two. The aspect of zero rating, and probably related to our policies. If we want to be an e-learning driven societies, our policies quickly need to catch up with that. If, for example, the Department of Basic Education avails certain learning content, digital textbooks on their website, they need to be for free. We should not add another barrier where children can now not access that particular learning content within that. So I feel that there's a huge need for us to ensure that our policies and equally resources and funding allocated to e-learning is much more considering the current needs of the schools and catching up with the times, so to say. So I'll just end on those two.
Yeah, but thanks for that. And I'm sure if telecommunications companies are listening right now, they take that point, because I know that universities have already been, assisted with zero rating. So can we do the same thing with schools? So we take that point in others that you highlighted. Maybe Coleen, you spent more than 30 years in e-learning space. What do you think are some of the practical things that we can do now to really avoid a situation where young people lose education? What is one thing or two things that you think can be practically, apply or implement in our schools?
Okay, let me start with my ideas on, let's call it pre-COVID thinking and post-COVID thinking. I think that's probably the best scenario that I can create. If you think back on the conversations that we had between parents and teachers, in the boardrooms, in the educational hallways, we spoke about, oh my goodness, this is such a dangerous thing. When we give kids access to this, oh my word, we've got to put all sorts of police at every gate and portal that we can find. We cannot give them access to the laptop. They're not supposed to spend time on a tablet. Oh my goodness. And all of these fears, we fed the argument of please don't e-learn, please don't access devices with our fears. What we did not do is educate our children to become digital citizens, how to access devices and the internet responsibly. Instead of that, lots of us kept our kids away for fear of what could happen to them. Instead of providing them with the weapons and the armor plating to access the digital world, we kept them away, or we felt that a way of allaying our own fears as parents was to keep our children away and to keep the young people away. However, young people and children will go there anyway because they are curious. They want to know. But now, because of our fears, they weren't armor plated and they weren't taught to be digital citizens. So I think the first thing now, then COVID came, and suddenly COVID forced us to wipe away all our fears and access those devices quickly. And suddenly it became okay.
Yeah.
But the thing about the internet, it remains a place where we need to be able to navigate as digital citizens responsibly. If I go to this country or that country or the next country, I need to know where to go and where not to go. I need to know how to be safe. I need to know how to navigate my travels. And in the same way, we need our children to become digital citizens. So for the first thing for me is allay the fears, arm yourself with knowledge, know what's going on technologically. And please, let's not talk about parents of a certain age. My hair, this doesn't come out of a bottle, but I am still not afraid of technology. So there's absolutely no excuse. How do I allay my own fears? Is with knowledge in information. And if I have that, if I upskill myself, how many of us were able to go home and work from home? Because of the fact that we entered the digital world and we were able to upskill ourselves to be able to become productive citizens even in the fourth industrial revolution. So first of all, allay your fears with knowledge and information. That's the first thing. The second thing that I can agree with the professor, absolutely. As water is to vegetables to grow, data is to e-learning and to everything else that we do. So we need data and we need that fast. And the thing about South Africa is, again, you know, I was so encouraged with stuff that happened during COVID-19. When I became uncomfortable with something, I saw people in the media talking about that issue, and I thought, but what's going to happen? Nobody's going to listen to them. And you know what? People listen. People act. So we have to converse about this, talk about it, keep on talking about the cost of data so that those who listen don't cover themselves with a blanket and don't listen. They listen. They listen to social media. They look at us conversing about it, and they notice that people need data at an affordable rate. And if it's free, even better.
Yes.
That's the second thing. Yeah. And you know what? Many years ago, I heard Oprah say something on television when I still watched television, when we still had time to watch television. She said, each one teach one. And that has stuck with me for all these years. And Professor, like you said, and as our honored principal who sits here with us said, by sharing devices, I have a little bit of data on my device. Can I share with you what I have? That's the only way until we get into a situation where we have freer access to what we currently, our resources. Let's share what we have and let's each one teach one. Principal, you said that 127 of your 215 grade 12s, that's almost 1-to-1. So if they can get into groups of 1 to 3, study groups of 1 to 3 using WhatsApp, that's the way to go forward. Whilst we are having these conversations, whilst we are pushing forward, and there's a little Mmaki that I really like him. There's am I allowed to use brand names? The Johnny Walker Mmaki. Just keep walking. Let's keep walking. Let's keep pushing forward. You know what? There's a lot of criticism for a lot of our politicians, and they do a lot of things wrong. But the day when Mr. Panyaza Lesufi took a whole bunch of tablets and he delivered that, everybody thought, but they're all going to get stolen. And they got stolen. But you know what? It's like the Johnny Walker Mmaki. He kept walking, kept pushing. Maybe that was not the right time for those tablets in those schools. And maybe, yes, they got stolen. But you have to keep walking regardless. You've got to put one foot in front of the other one regardless. I heard, and I can't remember his name, last night, one of the universities, I'm not sure if he's the chancellor or doesn't matter, so forgive me for not remembering the name, but he said something about, do we now say that because not everybody has got cars, all of us have to walk by foot? We can't do that. What we have to do is get together and more than one person get into the same car, into the same vehicle, into the same bus. And in that way, everybody will get there. That's what I thought. And that just makes sense to me. Let's just keep on pushing. Let's keep on walking.
Thank you very much, Coleen, for those. Yeah, those are powerful points, and I think that kind of attitude is necessary in many, many aspects of our society, not just in education, but obviously today we're talking about education. So, Mr. Mavovana, we haven't had from you in terms of submissions.
Yes, thank you.
What if you were given the opportunity to tell a panel of people with resources, funding, and all these things, whether it be computers, data, and all these things, what would you say to them?
Okay, thank you very much, Wesley. Before I do, I think for me, this COVID-19 was actually a wake-up call for all of us. Why I'm saying that, because in the school, we have got about 16 smart classrooms. That means we have got the data projectors, we have got e-beams, and we've got maybe 8 visualizers. But maybe as a school, we never thought beyond the use of those gadgets beyond the classroom in terms of the online. That means where our thinking was only focused in using them in the classroom and not outside. But now in the COVID-19 has actually come to tell us that we need to think outside the classroom, because we may not have the luxury of being in the classroom every day. So we need to change. And what we have done as a school, before maybe I can share what I would say to a panel, we had a website, but during the COVID-19 lockdown, we had to go back and review our website and see how can we use our website as an academic portal for the students, which we have done for many of the resources that we have. But the challenge we have now is access. And then we have now in the process of applying for a 0 rating, so at least the kids can be able to access that website and get that information. If I would have a panel of experts, I would then say, for instance, if I would look to corporates like Vodacom has got Vodacom eSchool Learning. If kids could be provided with maybe, because I did an audit quickly of our grade 12s, and I found that out of these 127, only 30 of them are using Vodacom, but they are not aware of Vodacom eSchool Learning, which they can access for free without using any data. But now what we can do, if we can maybe get those Vodacom SIM cards for all our students, at least that will give them access to that platform and be able to use that. Because I've realized that if the school is going to succeed going forward, we need partnerships. We cannot do this on our own, but we need partnership. I like what the last speaker have said, that each one teach one, maybe to conscientize our students that if you have got data, let's begin to learn to share with the next person next to you. They say people shall share in the wealth of the country, and maybe that's where we should be starting. The wealth of the should be starting, the data should be a starting point where we're starting to share the wealth of the country. And I think I would say there are schools like ours. We are always willing to explore new avenues. And I think with support from corporate, with support from other partners, we can make the world go round. We are more than willing. But by Vodacom, I'm just making one example where already there is a resource that is available. If that resource can be given as a test case and say, let's use Hector Peterson and say, let's give them this X number of the Vodacom SIM card. And our duty as a school is to monitor how often do learners use that platform. Obviously, with the technology we have today, there should be some means of monitoring how often kids log into that system, and then we can take it from there. And any other form of assistance that we can get, we will really appreciate. But I'm just using Vodacom as one example because already the resource is available. It's just a matter of linking that resource with where it is actually more needed more.
Thank you very much, Mavovana. And I think if the corporates are listening today, they have a very clear mandate that there is a need to come forward and make a difference. And from our side, as Fast Company, we will make that call even louder through our platforms online. My team is busy doing exactly what everyone is sharing here today, and we will be sharing with the wider audience and even the recording of this discussion. Yes, Mr. Owen?
Can I just say something? We are discussing at the school management team in this week that our focus mainly seems to be in grade 12. And I realized that we are trying to fix the problem at the end of the production line. Because grade 12 sometimes might be already late. And we said, maybe we need to engage our parents. I know our parents don't have money, but sometimes they say being pushed against the wall gives you the momentum to climb it. We might have to test and see if next year's grade 8, we can start talking to our parents to make sure that each learner has got a device. I know it may be seen as a big ask, but if we don't try, we'll never know how much it will work. So our grade 8s of 2021 already, they become accustomed to use their cell phones as a tool for learning in the classroom. If you can start in grade 8, I'm telling you, 5 years down the line, we'll have a different caliber of learners and a better understanding of how technology is being used in the classroom. Whilst we're trying to fix the problem with the grade 12s, but we can't be waiting for them to get to grade 12 again to start solving those problems.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Mavovana. And I think it will definitely assist young people during this time and even beyond. But I just want to put something on the table, something that the editor of us is keen to pursue as a project. And that is, today the technology world creates so much of these devices, such that I actually have about 4 mobile devices at home, and I only use one. That's because of the upgrade. What if we had a situation where people would donate device they are not using? Obviously, if it's broken, it may need to be fixed, but donate those to those who really need them. And that's what I would like to propose to everyone here today, that any pilot program, start maybe with Hector Peterson as a school, and make sure that those grade top learners have access to the devices, especially those that do not. And perhaps, begin a process of developing a model that could be applied elsewhere as well. So that's just one thing that I would like to put on the table and say, let us really talk about the digital divide. Just start doing something and really get us going, and not, looking back and saying we can't because of one, we can't because of two. So I must say that this discussion for me has been really informative, because it's one thing to read about these things, it's another to really hear from people who deal with them daily. Right now, we have 10 minutes before we conclude, and really thank you for, dedicating your time. But maybe a last word to each and everyone about everything that we confronted with today. In the next few days, maybe the schools will start, and we don't know, there's many opposition to school starting, but maybe we have a thought or two to share. Maybe let's start with you, Jantjies. What is one thing you'd like to share with us today in review of everything?
Maybe, Wesley, if
I think I appreciate the great conversations that we're having, because it's through the conversations that we can build a better roadmap moving forward and move beyond the challenges and move to solutions. I think I totally agree with the refurbishing idea. Many higher learning institutions, many corporate sector organizations keep on bringing in new devices within the organization, and the old devices could just be refurbished and repurposed for schooling purposes. One thing that led me to community work, and I always say this, is having a student coming into university or higher education, having never ever used a computer before or a digital platform. It was such an eye opener on how the digital divide actually continues and gets perpetuated. And when we look at the recent statistics results, that there are children who don't have higher education, who are not in work, and who are not in school. meaning that some of those children will not even land up in higher education. So we should never underestimate the power that basic education actually has in skilling children with digital skills that are critical. And I think, Coleen, spot on with that. Children are now digital citizens. If you have an opportunity, for example, to register for a course without going to university, register for a course on Udemy, you should have that opportunity to do that. And with the skills that people like Mr. Mavovana are able to give you in basic education, you then have many opportunities of accessing those opportunities online. So I definitely will continue to emphasize the fact that technology is no longer a nice to have. It is now a functional tool that we need to place within education, not ignoring other critical aspects that we need to also continue to consider.
Thank you very much for those words. Coleen, parting words in the few minutes that we have.
I see on the sideline the conversation is all about the digital divide. And the question is, will the digital divide become bigger? And my answer to that would be no, it will not become bigger. It will become smaller because external factors are forcing us to make that divide smaller. For us as Brainline, it's always been about access to education and not about how fancy or how colorful or technologically advanced do I make education. It has always been for us about, because the post office couldn't deliver our little CDs anymore, it wasn't possible, because paper is too voluminous and too heavy to send and too costly to send. How do we give the learners what they need? And the internet was the answer to that. And technology based on that was the answer to that. So it was about access to education. And I think if there's one thing that COVID-19 will deliver to us, it will be access to education and narrowing the digital divide, because it's been forced on us, not because we were so clever, it was forced on us. And I think that's a wonderful thing that is happening now.
Definitely a major disruption that's leading to innovation that you can even imagine right now. Thank you for those words. Mr. Mavovana, your parting words, this few minutes that we have now.
Thank you. I know for now everybody is engulfed in fear, but I must say these are very exciting times for me, because I've realized that these times are calling for a different kind of leadership. As we are preparing for schools to reopen, teachers are worried and parents are worried and learners are worried. But I've taught myself that as a leader, I need to be as calm as I can be, because if I am panicking myself, not that I've got all the answers, but if I am calm, I'm panicking myself, then everybody else around me is going to become. And I really find that really working, because in this past week, I had a series of meetings with the school management team, and I've seen how that calmness has actually helped all of us to regain our strength and be positive about what's going to happen. It's not going to be easy, but I think COVID has come to us for us to think outside the box. And I feel it's something that can be done. The challenge that we will need to have is the upskilling of the educators, because teachers need to look at different modalities of teaching and learning than they used to have before. So those are my parting shots. I just want to say to principals out there, this can be done. These are very exciting times, and a lot can be achieved out of this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mavovana, for those words. And really, it's encouraging to hear a teacher, a leader, having that kind of attitude, and with that type of, view of the world, definitely go forward. Thank you very much. At this point, I'd like to thank our audience that has really participated. We have so much insight from you, and I must just say that we will definitely be, answering those questions through our publication online, and really, engaging with you further in the concerns that you have. And I also want to thank Brainline, Coleen, who is leading Brainline, for really a partner in this process. This is just the beginning of the process of really talking about education and technology. We're so much grateful that support us in making this possible. And looking forward to working further with you in sharing more solutions in this space. And my colleagues from Walt, from Fast Company, who very much instrumental behind the scenes to make this first virtual, event and Fast Company Talks. I'm really grateful to support. Once again, to our panelist, Professor Jantjies. She's a very good friend of Fast Company. We so much appreciate your insight. I know a lot of people respect, a lot comes from you, and really grateful for the insight that you've shared for us. And I would like us to, this part, and more important, documenting this. A lot of people who can't access, for instance, this discussion would like to read, watch more. So we'd like to really document this. Mr. Mavovana, as always, we learn a lot from you. And I think teachers, they must be very proud of what you do. To yourself as well, thank you very much for making time, especially now. Teachers are so busy, principal are busy with preparations. Thank you. I have, so much appreciate what you've done for us. So to everyone, we are now coming to an end of a very powerful, I think, discussion around education and technology. We will be sharing more insights with you online via fastcompany.co.za. And this is not the last conversation that we have. There will be more of similar type conversations. Look out on our site for, discussions around innovations, ideas, innovators that we will be talking to about solving problems that truly matter. So once again, thank you everyone, and be safe out there and stay healthy.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Everyone.
Thank you
So much.
Yes.
Everyone.
Thank you.